Hello, beautiful and poet souls. Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time visiting my channel, I am so excited and happy to have you. First and foremost, let me introduce myself. My name is Helena Larson. I am a trauma and recovery coach. Her Empowered Life is a channel dedicated to women empowerment, to bring voice to women's issues and challenges. And my goal is to help women like you overcome trauma to build resilient life by empowering you with tools to discover your true, authentic self, embrace your story, claim your place in this world, and live your best life. So, the last time I was on the channel, the topic of conversation was really about recognizing the signs of abuse. And today we're going to dive a little bit deeper into trauma, understanding trauma, specifically around psychological trauma. I do have some notes prepared, so bear with me if I keep looking away because I'm trying to avoid saying because that seemed to be my downfall. And obviously I want to try to practice to be a better speaker for you too. So if you have any comments on any specific topic that you want to listen to or you want to know, please feel free to give me your comments, feedback on what you want to know more of. But let's get this video started. We're going to dive into trauma. I got this resource actually through, let's see here. Yes, the Crisis Prevention Institute. So in my last video, I actually shared a little bit around my challenges when I was a child and how I actually I didn't go too deep into it, but I was a victim of abuse as a child, and then later I went on into an abusive relationship. And trauma takes a toll on you, and a lot of times we don't recognize even what trauma is. So in this video, I'm really going to dive right into what trauma actually is and what are some of the ways to recognize trauma. So after this video, the goal is for you to be able to have a deeper awareness about key trauma related concepts. So what trauma is, how to recognize trauma, and then also a greater understanding of trauma's effect on behavior. So a lot of people don't realize that the after effect of trauma is it affects the way you see the world and how you respond to things, because when you are in trauma, your fight or flight, instincts is very strong, and sometimes you are in that place for a long time and you don't know how to shut it off, and so everything around you triggers you. So let's first of all dive into what trauma really is. So the definition of trauma: an event or series of events, an experience or prolonged experiences, or threat or perceived threats to a person's well-being. The individual's daily coping mechanism can be negatively impacted by trauma. Subsequent behavioral responses to daily life may be filtered through this perspective. So it's really important for us to understand the profound neurological, biological, psychological, and social effects trauma has on an individual. Recognizing that person's constant interdependent needs for safety, connections, and ways to manage emotions or impulses. Like I said, sometimes after you've gone through a traumatic event, you don't realize how it impacts you, because what happens is there is two levels of consciousness. So like right now we are aware that we just had a traumatic event happen, but our subconscious, our body recognizes trauma in a physical sense. So sometimes, as much as maybe you had a traumatic event happen maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and you think that you're over it, right? You move past it. It's been years. You think that it is over. Obviously it's in the past. It's not happening to you right now, but your body had an imprint when the traumatic event happened, and so your subconscious mind, your body, picks up subtle instances or subtle things that trigger that response. So it's important for us to really recognize how it really affects us in our brain and affects us psychologically, and how our body or the way we respond to the triggers affects um, affects how we respond to things, if that makes sense. Triggers, so signals that act as signs of possible dangers based on historical traumatic events or experiences, and which lead to a set of emotional, psychological, and behavioral responses that arise in the service of survival and safety. Triggers are all about one's perceptions experienced as reality. The mind-body connection sets in motion a fight, flight, or freeze response. A triggered individual experiences fear, panic, upset, and agitation. So one simple example I can give you is, it seemed like, okay, in my mind as a child, when I was my abuser was really my mother, and there are several other different people, but my mom, it seems like when she abuses me, in the sense that when something happens, when a traumatic encounter happened with my mother, it's always on a rainy day. I don't know why. It happens on a rainy day more than not. And so every time I correlate a rainy day to something bad is about to happen. Even until now, sometimes I'm like, okay, it's a rainy day. What does that mean? Is it something bad gonna happen? Is it gonna happen for real? No. But it is something that I correlate to my traumatic experience with my mom. And so sometimes it's smell, maybe certain cologne or certain perfume causes you to remember that specific incident. Or if, let's say, you went through a traumatic car accident and the smell of smoke, or the sound, even sound can be a trigger too. The sound of ambulances, sound of the cop car, sirens, can make you feel more tense, because you naturally you are thinking, you're put back into that traumatic incident again, where you are feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm in danger, I need to pay attention. And so you kind of tense up for that, embrace yourself for that event to happen. So these are just some of the trauma triggers that we don't even realize. And smell, sight, sound, those are all things that happens throughout our lives, on a daily lives. So sometimes we don't realize that this sound, sights, or smell might trigger the way we feel, or our mood, or our approach to whatever situation, even though it's non-related. So there are three specific trauma types. So the first one is the type 1 is acute trauma. So it results from an exposure to a single overwhelming event. So it could be maybe you got raped, maybe someone passed away, it's the death of a death of a loved one, natural disaster, maybe some other places, like they experience flooding, or the California wildfire. It's a one-time thing, but it is traumatic. And some of the characteristic for acute trauma is detailed memories, omens, hypervigilance, exaggerated startle response, misperception, or overreactions. So I can remember one time I was in a car accident. For some reason, we were trying to turn to the left, and the person behind us didn't stop in time, and so hit the trunk of our car. And I was pregnant at that time. And anyway, what happens is, after that car accident, nobody got hurt, everybody survived and all that. But what happened is, right after that accident, I remember when I get in the car, I'll be very nervous, especially when there's braking involved. It just kind of puts me back in that situation where I feel the jerk when the car hit us. So that's kind of an example of acute trauma. The second type of trauma is called complex trauma, and this results from extended exposure to traumatizing situations. Examples: prolonged exposure to violence or bullying, profound neglect, series of home removals. So those are just examples. Characteristic: denial and psychological numbing, dissociation, rage, social withdrawal, sense of foreshortened future. So for me, complex trauma is where I'm at. I am actually diagnosed with post-traumatic disorder, PTSD, post-traumatic uh, disorder. I don't know why I can't remember that PTSD. But anyway, brain fart. Uh, so what I remember for me was in Singapore. I guess now it's probably more of a big deal with oh, there you go, post-traumatic stress disorder. Oh my gosh, I couldn't remember for the life of me what that S stand for, but it came back to me. So when I was a child, I grew up in Singapore, and in Singapore it's not like over here where physical abuse is considered like a big deal, right? If I were to take a cane and cane my child, or you guys call it switch, whatever it is, you would report, you would call the cops on me. But back in the day where I grew up, we can actually go to the store and pick a cane. It's kind of like a stick, and get beaten up by our parents. So for me, and it's sold in the store. So I mean, can you imagine having a child discipline tool sold in the store? And sometimes when I get in trouble and my mom can't find the cane, she would go to the store and say, which one do you want? And I know the thinner it is, the more painful it is. So you want to try to find a fat cane so that you don't get bitten up. It doesn't hurt as bad. So what I remember is when I know that I'm about to get caned, I numb myself. I kind of disassociate myself. It's like I brace myself for the pain, but I remove my consciousness out of my body. It's kind of like you're numbing yourself to the abuse. And as I grew older, obviously my mom can't discipline me with the cane anymore because I'm growing into a woman. She's it's more like a abusive language. She called me every name in the book, and she just makes me feel like I'm nothing. And I had to disassociate myself because it's too painful for me to hear how she yells at me. It's too painful for me to hear how she demeans me because she's my mother. And I had to learn a way to cope, to feel safe, because I'm a child, so I can't run out of the house or escape out of the situation. So the only way to escape of the situation is to disassociate my consciousness so that I can cope with what's happening to me in that moment as a child. The third type of trauma is called crossover trauma, and it results from a single traumatic event that is devastating enough to have long-lasting effects. Example: mass casualty school shooting, car accident with fatalities involved, refugee dislocation. Some of the characteristic is perpetual mourning or depression, chronic pain, concentration problems, sleep disturbances, irritability. This I can relate to, like what's happening right now with COVID. I know that obviously this is not our first month dealing with it, but very, very early on, when we all do not know what was happening to us, it can be very scary, especially when we don't know what this disease is. We do not know how it all we know is people die from it, and it can be scary. And so you might be in a depressive state because you are not sure what's gonna happen next, and you don't want it to happen to you. So there's a lot of fear involved. So that could be one example. And all those Sandy Hook shooting, school shooting, those people who are in it, maybe they felt like they they are still in that war zone, and they have to deal with why did I survive and my friends didn't, for example. So those are just three main trauma types that we are talking about here. And one thing I really want us to really recognize is the effects of trauma on our behavior. So a few different questions you can ask yourself is, what type of trauma could be at play here? What are some possible triggers? They can be obvious or subtle. And the other question is, how could you respond in a trauma-informed way? So, for example, I am affected with when there's loud noises. Why? Because when I was a child, my mom used to scream at me all the time. When she screams at me, I just my body just goes numb and I get very ragey. I'm very mad because as a child, I wasn't able to express my voice because my mom, if I expressed my voice, my mom was gonna beat me up. So I only, all I could do is to experience my rage inside. And so as I grew older, anything that is loud and yelling and chaotic brings that rage and anxiety in me. And why it causes rage is because, or the anxiety is because the environment around me mimics what happened in the past. So I subconsciously, I know, okay, for example, it's my children playing, they're just being loud, they are just trying to, have fun. But subconsciously, my body recognizes those yelling and loud, chaotic noise as you're in danger. You need to respond. You need to protect yourself. And so when I am around loud noises, it gets me very irritated and agitated because it increases my anxiety, and then I feel like I need to lash out. And I know that about myself. And that's what I mean by how could you respond in a trauma-informed way. Is now that I understand that my triggers is loud noise. For one, I can definitely help my family understand why I'm so mad or irritated when there's loud noise happening. Instead of them seeing from their perspective is mom is crazy, she's yelling or whatever. And for me, obviously, you kind of go over like stages. You don't end up here like where I am at right now, where I am a little bit more conscious of how I'm going to respond, right? Because it comes on like this. And so you need to be very conscious and mindful of how you're responding to it. So right now, when I find my anxiety coming on, and for information, I'm also a highly sensitive person and an empathic person. I'm an HSP, highest on the scale, and I'm an empath. So I might be feeding off of energy that I don't recognize, and I'm responding to that energy. So for me, spiritually, I have to learn how to switch off, and I had to learn to recognize, okay, is this my emotions or is it something that I picked up somewhere else? And for me, is stepping away from the situation helps me see more clearly, like, okay, maybe I'm just, whatever that happened earlier in the day is affecting me. I shouldn't be responding this way to my family because they are not involved in any of this. And I need to, or maybe I just need a quiet time. I need to step away and do something different. I need to distract myself. So those are all little tools that you can use to detract from the effects of the trauma. But before all of that, I had to recognize what was triggering this anxiety or what was triggering my rage. So all the years of pent up abuse, all the years of abuse had created pent up anger in me. Because when you are in an abusive situation, especially when you are a child, you are afraid to speak up. You are powerless. You don't feel like you have a voice. And all that anger is kept inside of you for the longest time. And for me, when I grew up, and I obviously grew older, and I started, obviously away from my mom, and getting into the real world, and you don't realize that you take it you take it out on your loved ones. Because why? You're comfortable, right? That's why it's a cycle of abuse, because what happened is you don't realize you're abusing others because you were abused before, right? Just like when you are in the cycle of being in an abusive relationship, an abusive household, you don't realize you're being abused, right? So you suffer, and you allow abuse to happen to you because you don't know better. But then when you go out to the real world, realize, okay, that's not how it should be. That is called abuse. So same thing for trauma, is you don't realize how trauma impacts you, and the way you lash out is actually a form of abuse to others, right? So for me, it's really recognizing that when I am in a flip of a switch being a bit crazy, it's not because I'm crazy. You're not crazy. It's because I don't know how to deal with the my senses overload, right? I need to recognize, okay, now I am feeling more and more and more anxiety. My body is more and more tense. My breathing is more and more heavy. My body is experiencing something. Now when your body is experiencing discomfort, then it creates an emotion. When you feel that emotion, then you respond to the emotion, whatever the emotion is. For me, I respond in a screaming, yelling way. I used to. I'm trying not to do that as much anymore, but because my mom, her way to respond to her anxiety was to scream and yell. And so all I knew was doing that, because that was what she did. And so I had to learn to not be that way, because of what I've learned is not necessarily the correct way. Does that make sense? So hopefully this helps you guys to really think about how you are being triggered by trauma, recognizing and understanding what trauma is, what it means to you, and feeling the effects of it. And it takes some time to really understand how you're feeling. It takes an amount of mindfulness, and it takes an amount of recognizing. But I'm here to help and support you, and that's why we're talking about this. So if you recognize some of the signs and need some help and support through trauma and abuse, reach out to me. I am here to help you. I've been through it myself, and I know how hard it is to get out of it, and even to recognize. I think the first step is to recognize that something is wrong, recognize that it is a problem, recognize that you can definitely do better. And but I think first is to really take a good look at yourself and see what you can do differently to impact the change in you. But that means there's some humility involved within yourself, right? Because we are all egotistic. I mean, not egotistic as in proud, but we are proud of who we are. And sometimes what we see in the mirror is not an accurate depiction of how people perceive us. So maybe when someone gives you a feedback around maybe how you respond to them, how you treat them, how you are in certain situations, it might make you mad and upset because your loved one is in your mind criticizing you. But then I think it's good for you to listen to that feedback, and maybe there's some truth to it, and really digest and think, okay, maybe I can make a change. Maybe I need to understand what that is. So I want to encourage you to take the time to dive into yourself. Hopefully this video helps you. I'm sorry, my son is just having a fun time out there. But if you're going through and trying to understand trauma, I am here to help you. Please go to my website, www.herempoweredlife.com, for a free discovery session with me. I would love to help and create a plan to help you move forward. It is very important, ladies, to take the time to understand what trauma is and how trauma affects you, because it really does affect every aspect of your life. I've been there. It's held me back. It's impacted me. It's make me it when I didn't know what it was, I thought something was really wrong with me. I am just like, why can't I just ever be happy? Why am I so difficult? Why am I so hard to understand? Why am I so different from others? But once I realized and understood that my past had affected how I respond to things, it really helped educate myself in getting in front of my triggers. And so that is a very important first step for you towards a better life, is when you take the time to understand how the past has impacted you and resolve it. Because until then you can begin to heal and be better and lead a better life. So ladies, I'm going to leave you with that thought. If you have any questions or feedback, and if you like this channel, if you like the content, give me a thumbs up. My goal is to empower you and to help you and give you the tools that you need to live an empowered life, and really to live your best life. So I'm going to leave you with that thought. And I hope to discuss with you more about trauma and recovery. Take care, and until we meet again, have a good day.